All right, welcome everybody. We are live here, and gosh, midway through August already. It's hard to believe that this year, Gar. They say they get faster. The years go faster as you grow older. That's true. It really is. I can't believe how quick we're in Q3. Far into Q3.
That's a real thing. I don't have time to explain it today, but one day I will.
But aren't you going to come out with a podcast or something like that, Garrett, at some point?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very, very cool. All right. Well, before we get into intros, as people come in here, I know we're starting right now at 1:00. I'm going to just put up a few things in chat, a few quick announcements. Welcome, everybody. And I have, number one, a URL we did our first CyberCast in quite some time. Now, the CyberCast is a podcast dedicated to the CIS controls. We did the first 18. We've had over 14,000 listeners on those 18 controls. A lot of people said they have helped tremendously in the implementation for not only their own MSP, but for also implementing the controls in their customers. Big iterative release with 8.1 came with the announcement of CSF, CSF 2.0, with the govern function. But we're going to continue on. We have a few more podcasts specifically to rounding out the controls where govern was added and the changes to the asset types. And then we'll get into the respond and recover portions of the controls. So that's number one. Number two, tomorrow we will be announcing the opening of early bird registration at Right of Boom. So stay tuned on that as well. We've got a lot of big announcements happening at Right of Boom this year. Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it, Tom, that we are in August already? All right.
I'd like to announce that Andrew is back to announcing a lot of things.
That was a minute.
Okay.
1 minute, Gar. All right. So in setting the stage here, I wanted to dedicate today a little bit away from what we normally do on the CyberCall, which is, cybersecurity centric. But I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today, Gary, has implications, because if you can run your business more profitably, grow it more exponentially, I think you have the opportunity to secure yourself better and your customers better, because it allows you to have those roles and dedicated roles and projects to dedicate to a lot of the things around governance, implementation of the controls, etc. So your thought?
I'm excited about today's call. You're going to let our two guests introduce themselves, and I'm lucky enough to be friends and get to work with both of them.
Yep.
But this is a rare opportunity. You get several true people throw around that term serial entrepreneurs, but today we get a chance, people who have built some amazing businesses and involved in a security space on top of it.
Yeah. So with that, if you have some friends that you think are in the business that really should hear this, please reach out to them and tell them to jump on in here, because this is really something you can't get at a university. And why I wanted to do this is Aaron, who's going to introduce himself, and then Jim shortly, just announced as the CEO of Rewst, their second raise, this one of $45 million in less than 12 months, collectively somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 million of being raised in 12 months. And I've had the good fortune of knowing Aaron. Aaron's hard to believe, but almost a decade now. We're a little under a decade, believe it or not. 2016. That's gone pretty quick. And someone that I consider a really awesome friend, but an incredible serial entrepreneur, as Gary said. And I wanted to interview Aaron in terms of what it is around building businesses and what you can apply from building SaaS companies, Gary? Because you mentioned offline in conversation with Aaron that there's a lot MSPs can take away from what principles of building world-class SaaS companies to world-class MSPs. Is that fair?
Yeah. Jim had said in the green room that now that he's built, several SaaS companies, he wishes he could go back and apply those principles, and he shares many of them. But it's same thing in my peer group. I feel like we could be more valuable because I've learned so much about the SaaS business and what's applicable. And it's more now than ever in terms of the metrics and how they operate and how to build, grow faster and increase your profits.
Yeah, absolutely. So we obviously just have Jim on from SaaS Alerts. So, all right, so let's do some quick intros. And I got a question or two for Aaron, and then Gary, I'll take it away. Aaron, a lot of folks out there know you, but maybe one or two don't. So with that, let you do a quick intro.
Hey, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, everybody. I'm probably more like you folks, all you folks listening, participating in this call. I've spent a majority of my career working for the man. I didn't become an entrepreneur until I was, almost 40. When I was working for the man, I wasn't some like rock star leader or anything. I used to joke that I reported to an intern that had management aspirations one day.
Don't they call that the Peter Principle, Aaron?
Yeah. And some things happened in my life. I had a son with who was born 14 years ago with a very critical life altering birth defect that made me go, hey, look, I better explore everything in my own life while I still can. And one of those things was becoming an entrepreneur. And so it's really hard to do when you're 40 because you have a mortgage, you have a family, you have car payments. And so if starting a business is something that interests you, try to do it as soon as possible. Don't wait as long as me when you've got so many obligations and so many risks to do it.
Right. More downside to measure against the upside.
Yeah.
Right.
But I had hacked my own brain so much that I had realized that the biggest risk was becoming incapacitated due to old age and never having done it, and then being pissed off at myself for never trying. And so I didn't just up and quit my day job, but I started on the side and then quickly quit and started Perch Security that was acquired by ConnectWise. Worked there for a number of months. I realized that being an entrepreneur had broke me as a person and I could never work for anyone else again. And that's when I started Rewst shortly thereafter. And here I am today.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro, Aaron. Jim.
Yes, Andrew. First of all, great to be here today. Hello, everyone. Jim Lippy, CEO of SaaS Alerts. The best job I've ever had is being CEO of this company. The worst job I've ever had when I was 14 years old was picking cucumbers. So that was my first entry point to working for the man, as Aaron says. But also like Aaron, I'm a lot like most of you. I was an MSP actually. So 2003, I got into the MSP space and quickly became CEO of Thrive Networks. We ended up selling Thrive to Staples. So we were the first acquisition by Fortune 100 in the history of the MSP space. Worked there for another 6+ years running that organization. And by the time I left, I was fortunate. I was able to run basically what they called the easy tech business for a while. So that was a $180 million P&L. And it was a great learning experience to learn from a lot of really great individuals at a really good company back in the day. And then I took that experience into the software space, and Independence IT. We ended up selling to Cloud Jumper. I was an executive at Kaseya for a while, and that led me to co-founding and becoming CEO of SaaS Alerts. So it's been a fun ride. And like Gary said earlier, we're talking about the whole MSP journey and SaaS companies. And I've been fortunate. I've had half my career in MSP and half my career in software. And I do a presentation called MSP Time Machine, because if I had a time machine, what I would do is I would go back in time with everything I've learned running and building a software company, and I'll bring a lot of those principles back to my MSP, because I believe that my MSP would have been that much better for it.
Really cool, Jim. Thank you. So Aaron, you kind of set the stage on my first question a little bit, which was your journey. Now, was, just out of curiosity, was Perch the first foray into entrepreneurship before I ask you the next question, or was there something prior?
I mean, there was a bunch of failed ideas prior. I was just teaching my son about being an entrepreneur this weekend, and he thinks I'm like this extremely successful person that's been doing it like this all the time. And I had to tell him, hey, look, I failed maybe 100 times, 100 various ideas I was in the middle of executing that didn't work. I had a startup prior to Perch Security called Soltra. And I had raised, me and a number of the folks that have founded this, we worked at a large financial services institution. We asked them if we could start this company, and the institution said, yes, we're not in that business. And then we went out and raised, $5-6 million to start the business. And then when we went to leave, the financial services institution said, oh, hey, that's a good idea. We want to do this. And so this is an example of a failed startup. They quickly took the money that we had raised and decided to burn $600,000-$700,000 a month, and that business died in a year. I learned a heck of a lot about starting companies from that. But then before that, I had some minor successes. I've run, this is going to date me, but a number of message forums. Some message forums with hundreds of thousands of users. And it taught me a lot about leadership, because when you have a message forum that has 350,000 users, you need an admin staff of maybe 20, 30 admins and a moderator staff of 100 moderators. How do you motivate people who aren't making money? And so if you can motivate and lead a team of folks that aren't getting paid, it's a very good skill set to take to a real business.
Aaron, I didn't think about asking you this, but you did an interview with CRN, and you talked about a lot of around community was a huge portion of success for Rewst, right? And empowering MSPs through community to share. And is that part of what you learned just a moment ago, sharing what you did in these forums? And then B, are there principles, Jim and Gary, like building community? I don't know if MSPs on the margin think about that as a mechanism for leads and, really in their regional areas, which I think is really important. But so Aaron, you first, and then Jim and Gary.
I've always built communities. So this will really date me. As a kid, I ran BBSs, right? And so I was building community there. And then when the internet came out, I immediately started doing forums. And I've had successful forum exits where I've sold forums to companies that buy them. And I realized since I was a kid that community is where it's at. Like, and if you look at it in software development, if you have a product that requires multiple people to use it to be successful, building the product, I would argue, is actually easier than getting people to use it. A good example of that is, say, like LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. Like, you could build a clone of that, but and it's very likely almost anyone on this call could build a clone of those products, but it's almost impossible to get the community around it like those companies have.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Definitely.
Gary, your thoughts, and then over to Jim on this.
Yeah, in any business, ultimately, if you can build a community of like-minded people, like, you know, every MSP wants to do it. Every software company wants to do it. Very few achieve it, right? Get there. And it has to do with why those people, you know, connect with the mission. And, but if it's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle, but once you get it, every dollar you invest in anything, hiring people, getting customers, it all is multiplied. It's a huge lever. And I know in building True Methods, because we build a community, we were able to really build the business based on other companies' marketing budgets. Right. Because other people saw we had this community, other vendors, and they wanted to, you know, they want to try to leverage and be part of it. And so there's a lot of things you can do. And Jim, I've watched you do the same thing in terms of building a community around a concept and a mission.
This is true. So, Andrew, do you remember, it was about 2 years ago, the first call I made after we did our $22 million raise with Insight?
Yeah, I believe it was a big bet on Bitcoin.
No, I called you. I called you because I wanted to moderate our weekly community call.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew that was an investment that would pay off. And in fairness to the MSPs out there that have to sell to direct end users, it's a lot more difficult for MSPs to build community than it is for us software companies that sell to MSPs to build communities, because MSPs are more prone to actually subscribing to a community, right? You've got all these like-minded folks, and a lot of the community stuff has been paved the way by folks like Gary that have essentially created peer groups, right? So MSPs are just more prone to be willing to be part of a community. Now, that being said, it shouldn't stop you from trying, if you're an MSP, to build your own. I think if I was to do it today, what I would do is go kind of vertical by vertical, pick your top 4 verticals, right? And I would reach out to the executive sponsor that you work with. Is it the CFO? Is it the controller? And essentially say, look, you're in the legal space. You are in charge of all financial decisions around technology. Let's get 15 of those folks in that vertical, and let's have a lunch and learn every Tuesday, and then just do it every week or every other week for that vertical. Just like a practical idea, something that I know that I think about today that I would try if I was an MSP, because we didn't do it ourselves back then. And again, in fairness, it's easier for us to market to MSPs from a community perspective than it is the other way around, but it shouldn't stop you from trying.
Yeah, so what I would say is it is easier, but you don't need to do it at scale, because MSPs customers spend so much more. right, annually with them and stay for so long. And so what I used to do in my MSPs is we would bring in the leaders like from our customers and prospects in. They thought they were coming, to learn, and we did teach them something, but I really had it set up almost like a peer where they could see and start to view us as connectors.
Yeah.
And so you plant that seed, and you don't need to have, thousands of people in your community like, Aaron and Jim do. We only had to have 50, 100, 150. And that was enough to change the way all of our customers felt about us, which is really important. And also to generate really good leads, ones that are closable because they're from like-minded people.
I'll just give one example of an MSP I know that does a really good job of being involved in their community, and they use it like, if you guys have seen Carl Bickmore on here, Gary, he's done a lot over the years to get involved with EO, and so much so now that he's a mentor in Arizona. Like he is on boards and teaches and advises a lot of businesses on their framework. It doesn't have to be EO, but something like that. I think concepts of leadership, or business principles, like you said, Gary, you get a bunch of people together. Hey, we're going to talk about X today, some business principle, and business owners. And if you're like, hey, we're going to have this person and this leader and this thought leader in our area, it works. People want to be around successful business leaders.
Community and charity work, same way, works the same way.
So Aaron, why do you hate on security all of a sudden? No, so you're obviously not everybody knows your background, but leading vulnerability management at Chase. You've been involved in security for many years, building Perch, and then why not stay quote unquote in security? Instead, here we are into RPA, and granted, it touches on it quite a bit, but can you kind of talk to us about the transition out of cyber, if you will?
Yeah, so I preface this, these are my opinions and feelings. It may not be reality, and it doesn't mean that other people shouldn't do cyber. It's just what I want to do or don't want to do, right? So a couple of things that kind of tweaked me or irked me on cybersecurity. The most simplest ones are that for the past 20 years, we've been dealing with the same exact issues, and all of our innovation in this space has been go-to-market innovation, more dramatic marketing, more marketing spend. I like to innovate and make cool new things. And when I realized that over the past 20 years, configuration has been the biggest threat vector, and it still hasn't changed. I'm not going to innovate us out of that. Everyone else has tried for the past 20 or 30 years, and it still is the biggest threat factor. There are a ton of things about cyber that interest me, man. I love doing threat intel and vulnerability management. But when I look at what is it that I liked about vulnerability management and what is it that I liked about threat intel, it was automating it. And that's kind of what pushed me there. Also, there's some other weird oddities that make it difficult to do cybersecurity, and to some degree difficult to automate cybersecurity, is that since the focus really on the past 20 to 30 years in cybersecurity has been better go-to-market, better marketing, same exact problems, we haven't created standards like we did in the IT industry. And it's so flippin' basic. Like if I buy a CPU for a computer and I hold this CPU up in the air and I say, I have a CPU here, everyone's going to go, yes. And if I grab a solid state drive and I hold it up in the air and say, I got a CPU here, people would disagree with me. 100% would disagree. Now, if I bought something in cybersecurity that maybe claimed preventative threat analytics. And I said, did I buy that to a group of people? Maybe 50% might think I bought it. Another 50% would mean, what does that word mean? I mean, it's very, very lightly defined industry. And how do you automate something if the words might be different between every product, right? And so that's why I like, IT, much more well-defined, it's less hazy. It's very true or false, unlike security.
Aaron, I have a different memory. So I want to talk a little bit about transitioning from cybersecurity to RPA. But my memory of how you got here is a little different. See, because I remember early on when you and I were talking, when you were starting to build the platform, it was a security play.
Yeah, because that's what I knew. Yeah.
Because that's what you knew. And it wasn't until the customers saw it and said, yeah, all that security stuff is great. Can it do this? Can it do that? And that's why one of the reasons why I think Rewst is so successful is that you rarely get a chance to have something like that, organic. So maybe talk about that beginning. And, there's certain times to listen to your customers and there's certain times where it works against you. But talk about that piece of it, how customers really led the product direction in the beginning.
Yeah. So you pull someone out of cybersecurity, and then you throw them into an automation company. The very first automation ideas that we're going to come up with are cybersecurity related ones.
Which, by the way, is the one I invested in.
And then we're building community at the same time because we knew we wouldn't succeed as a company without community. So we're, the day the first line of code goes out, the first Slack is up and running, and we're trying to get people to participate in it. And it's kind of difficult to get folks to participate super early because without anything on the screen, it's difficult for folks to even envision what the heck you're talking about to them when you're talking about your new product. So I would say 3 to 6 months into product development, MSPs are really starting to understand what this could be that we're building. And we're talking automation with them. And we're saying, well, here's a list of security automations that we're working on. And it was pretty blunt. It was like, hey, Aaron, these security automations are good, but have you seen my business? My entire business is manual. And so we'll have all these security things automated, but the business would be completely manual. And that's when we realized that security automation is important, but it's not the only thing that's important and may not even be the most important thing for MSPs.
But what's funny is underneath it, Aaron, really everything that you automate, when something is done timely, when it's done the same way every time, when it's done completely, every action, right, really is the basics of security. And that's kind of where you started, that, configuration and change management is the thing that everyone's been chasing in terms of security. So really from an underlying standpoint, isn't it all security?
Yeah. I mean, if you have an automation and you've done a few revisions of it, it's run several thousand times, you know that it never makes a mistake. That is security, right? Because if a person was doing that automation, they could make a mistake. And if you have an outage is an outage, it doesn't matter really if it was a security or a person, it's still an outage. When you start thinking about privileged access, if you have automations that do privileged access things, that's less privileged access you have to give real people. You can give it to your automations that only do those automations. those things that you're doing with privileged access, you know, those could potentially be considered configuration mistakes.
Gary, I want to bring up something that you and Aaron just touched on that I think is really important. And that was Aaron's pivot, listening to his customers, which goes all the way back to something we've been talking quite a bit about the last few months on the CyberCall. And that is around business impact assessment or analysis, whatever you want to call it. His customers, these MSPs, as he's saying, hey, we could do this cool thing in security and this cool thing, we could automate this in security. I said, whoa, 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 great, Aaron, that's awesome. But did you ever look at how my business is run? Think about what he just said. And if you look at Aaron, gut feel, like, you know, you can give some stats on automation, Gary, but this is where I want you to, both of you, and Jim, please feel free to talk in, the impact you've had on productivity and profitability and scale in these MSPs, Gary, is the business impact. It wasn't about security. And often as MSPs, we are focused on the, hey, we should do this security thingy, right? You know, does that make sense what I'm trying to convey here?
Yeah. Well, profitability is a precursor to security. I don't know too many MSPs that are securing their customers who run an 8% net profit business. I don't think it's possible, you know, to do that. If you can't be more efficient, and if you can't be more automated, you're not securing yourself, your customers, the way that someone else who checks those two boxes would.
Right. But Aaron, you impacted, like, how can you give us a sense, maybe even give us, you know, you don't have to, you can add a company name, an MSP or two name, you don't have to, but talk to us about some of the business impacts that, instead of going down, hey, let's talk security, the operational impacts that automation has had on profitability and scalability.
I think similar to your question, and this has always been a challenge for us and anyone else who's trying to do what we do since day zero, which is the definition of automation. I would say 6 months in, and this is, I'm spending all my own money. I've got 6 months in, I've got developers, other people working at Rewst building stuff. And I'm, you know, at 6 months at looking at the same code and product, you're even starting to get burnout yourself because no one's using it. You're not getting any accolades. And then you're starting to talk to MSPs and you say, hey, look, I'm building an automation product. Do you want to give us input? And the MSPs are coming back saying, we're fully automated. And I was like, what, did we build the wrong product? Because I thought we weren't all automated. Come to find out, everyone has different definitions of what automation is, and then also being able to envision what could be automated and what should be automated is like a market maturity thing. And so as the market matures, MSPs are starting to be able to realize what can be automated and what should they automate. And so the impact of the business, as the market matures, initially the market's like, yeah, I want a bunch of pre-built stuff. I want, you know, show me your list of automations. But if you look at how IT has advanced as an industry, it's never been a list. Like, what's the list of things you can do with JavaScript? What's the list of things you can do with PowerShell? Why limit us as an industry to a list? And so initially it was MSPs, the value to them was what they could install. And then eventually the real value came to them building and for specific automation needs that only their MSP has. And I see those needs every single day, everywhere. And so the best automations, the stickiest automations, aren't the ones that are like 500 steps. The best automations are the ones that are like 4 steps that only this specific MSP had the issue with, that they run. And now our customers can put time savings in their automations. So as they run, that time savings ticks up. These aren't marketing time savings. These are time savings that MSPs have put in. And I think over the past 30 days, it's about 675,000 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
That's
impressive.
insane.
I think one of the things, whether you're a software company or MSP, Andrew, it's really important to talk to your customers about outcomes and what you're driving in terms of outcomes for them. Whether it's automations that Aaron talking about, or what we do from a security standpoint for MSPs, customers. When we focus on, we always bring people back to end of the day. We want to help you better protect your customers, increase your monthly recurring revenue, and reduce your labor costs. And then that's the goal, right? And you can show them how you
Very
do.
few MSPs can do what you just said.
Yeah,
It's an end result, right, Gary? You always talk about end result. We always get wrapped around the axle. Sorry, Jim. Just continue, but we get wrapped around the axle, right, Gary, in the sales process.
Jim, if you get to the point where you can just have a sentence like Jim just had about your company, about your MSP, your go-to-market will change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I really learned being in the software business. Messaging is so important. Maybe the most important. There are so many great companies out there that never get off the ground because their go-to-market and their messaging just wasn't right. Doesn't mean they didn't have good products. It just means they couldn't really articulate what they did and how they did it and the problems they solved for the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and listen, we have the advantage, right, as MSPs, where we get a chance to really get to know a prospect, talk to them, can spend some time with them, again, because our average customer size is, large compared to most software, companies. But how many times have we heard, Andrew, my customers won't invest more in security? They don't understand the end result. You haven't asked them the questions about their business, because if you did, they would make that relatively small investment relative, to their business. One thing I want to talk about with both Jim and Aaron, again, because I know both of you, is you both have been able to scale businesses, right? But Jim, your background is sales. You're a go-to-market CEO. Aaron, you are not a go-to-market CEO. No, I'm not going to say you're not a go-to-market CEO. Your background is not sales, but you both you come from different angles, but you both have to be equally accountable to your boards, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to create a budget, which includes your growth, and be able to hit that budget. So, first you, Aaron, talk about being accountable for go-to-market when that is not your skill set. It's more technical and product.
I would say, I think I was just about as burnt out at tech as I was at cybersecurity. And so looking for a new challenge. And if anyone wants to get burnt out of tech, just follow all the new JavaScript libraries or packages that are coming out every day to make sure you don't miss one that you may need. Because I feel like 100 of them comes out a day and it's all the same thing. And then also with technology, it's all about abstraction, right? So someone else is trying to build another level of abstraction on top of the last level of abstraction. And so I started to see all of these patterns just continuing over and over again on the tech side. And that can get boring. But what did interest me are things that I needed to learn. And so sales started to interest me. because I knew nothing about it. Go-to-market and messaging started to interest me because I knew nothing about it. I mean, I thought branding now is like, I totally want to start a brand company someday because it's one of my favorite things to do. And you notice that with the Perch Security brand and the Rewst brand and all the theories that I'm running with as I build those brands. Branding, for example, is not about hiring a marketing firm and saying, hey, make me a brand guidebook. Sure, you're going to spend 10, 50,000, whatever on a brand guidebook that no one will ever follow and will have no impact on your go-to-market. And so what's neat is I'm learning these new things, and then I'm able to apply my product and tech principles behind them without having to learn those things. Did that answer?
Yep. And then, Jim, for you come at this as really a go-to-market and sales background.
Yeah.
So how does that, when you approach the business, and then you also need to have the other piece of it, which is operations, software, product market fit.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm the least technical person on this call across the board by far. Like, I don't code. I'm the last person you want configuring a server. So let's just get that on the table now. Definitely go to market is where I feel comfortable. I think it's important. In terms of the technical piece, I think really good people and then trust them to do what they do. At the same time, I understand the concepts and I bring them back to what is really important to the business and use principles to do that. So, for example, every month, even though we're a 100% virtual company, so we don't have an office or people to go to, but we do have a monthly meeting where we share the numbers with folks. I think transparency is really important. But we share the numbers, and I literally go through 4 principles every single time, and I use examples to illustrate why they're important. So the 4 principles at SaaS Alerts that we really focus on: urgency. So urgency, I found, is really important. And as a leader, it's one of the most important things you can have, because urgency dilutes. As you go through an organization, it dilutes. So if the leader isn't at like a 12, right? By the time you get down on a scale of 10, by the time you get down to the frontline employees, it's going to be a 2. So if the leader starts out at a 7, there's almost no hope. So urgency is a principle that we preach a lot. Progress over perfection is another one. And this is really around the product and the technical piece. My technical team, my engineers and chief product officer, CTO, will come to me with 1,000 different things we could do and how long it will take us to do them, and then how long it will take those things to be perfect. My job and what I'm accountable for is understanding what is most important based on the feedback from the community. We listen to what our partners are saying. That's super important. And then prioritize them. And then from a progress over perfection standpoint, we say, look, we're going to get something out that addresses this problem. It's not going to be perfect. We are going to live with that, and we're going to iterate over time and make it better and better and better. And our partners are going to help us do that. Then teamwork is another principle that we really harp on. And don't lose by yourself. You have all these resources around you. It's okay if you can do something by yourself and you can have a win by yourself. That's totally fine. But don't you dare lose by yourself, because the people that you need are around you to help you win. So leverage those. So it's really, in terms of what I think about on the tech side, it's trusting people finding the right people, manage or hire hard, manage easy, trust them to do their jobs, but then prioritize and guide the business through a set of principles that are going to make the organization successful.
Gary, Jim said something, and I'd like you and Aaron to talk about this. We didn't have this scheduled to talk about it. This is a really important principle for MSPs, and I'm not sure everybody does it. But I had the fortune of working with you, Gary, for 5 years, and working with Aaron and his teams for almost, like I said, almost 10, about 8 years now. Both of you do morning huddles, and it comes from the Rockefeller. Maybe you acquired it through the Rockefeller habits. Maybe you didn't. But Gary, starting with you and then to Aaron, can you guys talk to us the importance of morning huddles? These are not lengthy at all. Like Aaron's team's about 100 now, Aaron, and I think you're off a call typically in 7 minutes sometimes. But they're critically important, and so I want everybody to hear this because I think it's a really important thing where I've seen both companies. Both of you have very successful exits, but also lead very successful companies.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'll say this beyond huddles, one piece, I'm going to say meeting rhythms are just so important because it's what creates a heartbeat. Jim said that urgency gets diluted. So does messaging. Messaging gets diluted as you grow your business. And the way that you keep people knowing that what they're doing is not only successful, they're fixing something today, but it's in the context of what their job looks like to make it successful so that everything works together. That doing a good job is not good enough. You got to do a good job in the context how everything fits together to achieve the goals for growth and profitability and happy customers. And without having metrics and meeting rhythms, really, really hard to do that. People don't know what success looks like. And to me, that's the number one thing in terms of building a team, especially the thing that, SaaS companies and MSPs share, they're complex businesses.
But also keeping the team together, right? Churn, right? For
Absolutely.
Your people, right? Your employees, Gary. That's the thing I remember. I mean, people stayed with you for a long time. Aaron, your people have stayed with you through multiple companies and, don't leave. I mean, how critical for MSP. So again, I'd love for you to talk about the principle of meeting rhythm and things Gary just shared, but about employee longevity, employee happiness, because this is something that translates really well to MSPs.
So we do a daily, what we call stand up. It's the entire company is not required to be there, but should be there because we are aware that we have so many different shifts and time zones that we're dealing with that you can't always join all the time. But typically, we'll have 80% of the company on our daily stand-up, so anywhere between 70 to 100 people on it. And it was built initially at Perch, my last company, out of necessity. Companies were starting to become more and more remote. And so because of that, we were becoming more and more detached. There wasn't a water cooler anymore. The water coolers were information spread throughout the company. So the daily stand-up gave me a platform to announce things every day to the entire company. And since everyone's not sitting in cubicles overhearing what's happening in adjacent cubicles with other teams, stuff that's happening at a more tactical level within the company wasn't being spread around. And so the daily stand-up allowed each team to give it's only about wins and blockers, to announce wins and blockers throughout the entire company so other people can congratulate them or jump in to help them. The next big critical thing is culture. So people want to emulate the leadership, especially the CEO, because the CEO is going to think, well, everyone should act like me to make a good company. And so if the CEO is not getting in front of everyone, how does that culture get learned? I bet we would not have such a customer focused culture at Rewst if it wasn't for me getting on these morning stand-ups asking about particular customer issues that we're working on.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I see, Aaron, is that, if there's a customer issue, I see and again, I want MSPs to be hearing this, because this is what builds teams. The other team members will start to jump in. Hey, I can help with this. I can help with this. And then a day or two later, you hear about such and such a company is thrilled that you guys jumped on this. And it's this cycle of success, if you will, where the team feels good because they gelled, they worked together, and then you talk about the success. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's a win. So that's allowed. Wins are blockers.
Yeah. Very cool. Gary, let you ask a few questions while we're at it. Or Jim.
Yeah, wait, Jim, I wanted him to add on team building.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we do, I did at Thrive Networks. I've done every one of my companies. So every month we announce a Raving Fan Award winner. It's from the book Raving Fan. And essentially it's any employee we have to pick one. People get nominated, right? But we pick one employee that's gone, above and beyond for the customer or someone internally that, knocked down an obstacle of some sort, right? So we're highlighting the wins and how people are winning that award. And coming back to Aaron's point in terms of culture and team building, that's really important, because now people see by example. I really believe in catching people doing the right thing, because when you catch people doing the right thing, that instills or drives the behavior that you want. And when you highlight it to the entire organization, that means you have more and more people trying to emulate that, which ultimately is a good thing. You could, in terms of employees and keeping employees around and motivated, one of the things I really believe in is a why statement. So people understand. There's a lot of educated people on this call, like the MSPs, and you all have really smart people that work for you that can go out and get other jobs someplace else, probably paying the same, maybe more money, doing something else. How do they feel, or why do they feel attached to your mission? That's really important. Why do you exist? At SaaSalerts, we start every single internal meeting with a why statement. Why do we exist as an organization? And we have people read it. And when I do a presentation externally, I let people know what our why statement is, so they know why we exist. And I believe that our employees feel so strongly about what we're doing and what our mission is that they become really attached to it. Mm-hmm. And when you can win hearts and minds like that, then you're going to create a culture where your employees want to be there. They want to succeed for you, your customers, and themselves. And that just spreads and spreads and spreads.
Yeah. Listen, what I learned in running 2 MSPs, you can't manage people to efficiency or security. You can't manage them to it. You can't manage them by beating them up that they got to put everything into a service ticket. You have to lead them in the way that you hear Aaron and Jim talking about. And that is about culture. It's about communication. It's about meeting rhythms. It's about everybody having a defined role with metrics to knowing how it impacts the customer, themselves, their team members. Then when that happens, people can figure it out for their own. But I see too many business leaders, they're trying to push the company rather than to lead it. And you don't get to the place where these two guys have gotten to, like with multiple successes, by pushing and managing. You only get there by leading.
Yeah. And Andrew, one of the things I think is really important is that, especially as you scale, you can't motivate individuals. You have to create an environment in which people feel motivated. And it's two completely different things. And I see someone here mentioning, inclusion empowerment. A long time ago, back in 2003, right before I started in this space, I actually wrote a book based on my experience doing consulting with a lot of different companies. And the book is entitled 5 Management Principles and 1 Creed. Creed is actually an acronym, CREAD. It stands for Communication, Recognition, Empowerment, Accountability, and Development. And I do this presentation.
I read that book.
Gary's read it, and he's seen my presentation on it. But I believe that as a leader, if you can follow those 5 principles, then you will be successful. You will have degrees of success. There's other things that go into it, but you will have degrees of success. And I put it in an acronym because people remember acronyms. And it's easy to remember. Did I communicate today? Did I recognize the right people? Did I empower my people? Did I hold them accountable? And did I develop them enough?
Yeah, very good. Hey, Garrett, maybe we could talk about this. And that is, we've talked about culture, we've talked about rhythm, we've talked about empowering teams, and Jim, your book. So like one thing that I wanted to get all 3 of you to comment on is building trust. And it's often something that's really interesting. I think maybe some of you have heard this, and I'll just quickly say this and turn it to you, Gary, to comment. Simon Sinek did this great talk. He's interviewed, the leaders of Navy SEAL command, units and stuff. And he goes through this metric about, basically high performer and high trust, low performer, low trust. He has this grid, 4x4 grid. And they obviously would rather take a lower performer, higher trust person in the teams over a high performer, low trust. But trust is something that, on one hand is nebulous, but trusting your leader, trusting your teammates, that's something that's really critical. And to again, wanting people to stay and be loyal to you. Fair?
Yeah. And I think, again, a lot of that happens in a company through developing, starting with the leader on down, what the core values are of that business, and be willing, by definition of a core value, to fire a customer or an employee for repeated violations of that, because everyone is watching what you do, as a leader. And one thing is for sure that I've learned: everybody has different motivations of what they want out of life. And most of the people, the hundreds of people that have worked for me in my career, almost none of them wanted the exact same thing out of life than I wanted. They were all much more mentally healthy than me. Right. But what we shared was we all wanted to be part of something special. And I've been able to speak with the Rewst team. I've been able to present it at sales kickoff for SaaS Alerts. And what I see from leadership down is companies that the people feel that they're part of something that's bigger than just them. And it's amazing, right? When you see it grow and you watch it happen and you feel it in the people, when you talk to them. But, in my companies, that's always my top, how I measured it. Does everybody feel like this is something special, that they're going to look back later in their career and say, man, that was we had lightning in a bottle.
It's funny you say that, Aaron, over to you, that Gary said something, it's bigger than us. And again, that's the SEAL team thing, right? That it's not about me. It's about the guy to my right and my left and the mission. So maybe you can kind of talk about that.
Usually, so there's a couple blatantly obvious things to do to build trust, like sharing all the information about the business, from how much cash is in the bank account to all the finances around the business, which we do all the time. As long as someone cares to listen, they'll retain it. But here's the biggest factor for building trust and culture, is you got to make egos illegal in your business. And that has to start from the top down, because the minute, like you talk about, your team member on your left, on the right, as soon as one of them gets an ego, they're either proactively fighting against the other two, or at least subconsciously doing it. So ego is one of the biggest killers I've seen of every startup out there. Eliminate it today.
Yeah.
And you know why it's hard to do, Aaron? Because sometimes you get a high performer.
Yes.
That has ego. Like they're the definition to me of a D player. Low culture, high performer. They're the ones I know that I stuck with in my career too long. Big mistake.
Andrew, I was going to say if I look at my career, my biggest failings were hanging on to high performers, low trust people, those people that Aaron refers to. Most of them have egos. I held on to them too long.
Really well said. Really well said.
Hey, this was great. I want to thank both Jim and Aaron. Again, I've had the pleasure of knowing them for a while and watching them from ideas grow them, not just amazing businesses, but amazing teams and cultures and visions and missions. So really happy. And I hope that everybody felt that right today.
Yeah. I hope, first, Aaron, Jim, Gary, all appreciate all your friendship and sharing your knowledge with everybody. And I hope everybody out there could take something away personally for the team, for the company. Again, that's what this is all about. So until next week, again, thank you, Jim, Aaron, Gary, for coming on, and everybody listening in. Make it a great day, everybody. And we'll see you next Monday. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.